Welcome back, friends, to the Health Ranger Show, where we are talking about vaccinations and whether they're safe or effective, or perhaps it's just a lot of quackery pushed by a system of medicine that really depends on vaccines to recruit patients for future treatments. Sounds outrageous, but if you look at the facts, you may find yourself curious about some of the new things you'll learn about what's really true on vaccines. So check out this book. It's called Saying No to Vaccines, and you'll find information about that online too at this website, sayingnotovaccines.com. The website and the book are both authored by Dr. Sherry Tenpenny, who's also the president of the board of the American Association for Health Freedom, the AAHF, which you'll find online at healthfreedom.net. Now, Sherry, someone who is adequately informed about this issue is at some point undoubtedly going to say, okay, I don't want to poison my children with these vaccines. The risk is too high, the benefits are not proven, and so on. What then should they do? They don't want their children to be vulnerable to infections in public schools, for example. What action steps can they take then that are natural and supportive of the body to help boost their child's immunity?
Well, that's a great question, Mike, and it's something that comes up all the time. And it's really simple things that everybody can do with their children or with their own body to keep themselves healthy. Simple things like avoiding white sugar, white flour, washing your hands frequently, not obsessively, but frequently when you've been out in public places. One of the things that I talk to my patients about a lot in the office is getting your kids to bed on time. We don't seem to enforce the bedtime as much as like when I was growing up. I mean, you see these little kids out at the mall and different places at like 8, 9 o'clock at night, and they're just exhausted. And there's so much science out there that actually shows that it's so important for children to get 10 to 11 hours of sleep at night to keep their immune system strong. And if you're feeding them good food, trying to eat organic as much as you can, staying away from McDonald's and all the trans fats, trying to avoid white sugar, white flour, and instead substitute healthy snacks, things like bananas and oranges and apple slices and things that will really be good for them. Get them away from their computer and get them away from their Game Boys and PlayStations and get them outside, make them run and play and just really exercise their immune systems. It's that simple to keep healthy. Taking a good quality multivitamin, drinking plenty of fresh purified water. And the reason that it's so simple that people can't believe that that's really true. But it's because we've been so indoctrinated by the pharmaceutical industry, because the pharmaceutical industry can't create a $5 billion industry off of something that simple.
I've given this a lot of thought, and I've even started writing a special report on this, and I'd like to share it with you. And it basically says that, infection is not caused by the presence of a virus. Certainly that is one necessary element for an infection, but it is not the primary determining factor. Infection is caused by an opportunistic failure of the host, the failure of the terrain, so to speak. It is the host that determines whether an infection occurs, not the presence of a virus. This mindset of just trying to kill viruses and focus on the virus and have no attention given to the health of the patient is, frankly, it's outdated. It's outmoded. It should be in a museum somewhere and not being practiced today.
Well, there's two comments I want to make about that, Mike, because you're absolutely right. One is it's a history lesson again because it goes back to the debate between Pasteur and Beauchamp. Pasteur was it's all about the bug, and it's all this bugs, and we got to kill the bugs, and we need antibiotics to keep the bugs away. We need antiseptics, blah 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 about the bug. And Pasteur, who was his competitor at the time, said no, it's about the terrain. It's all about the terrain. It's about the health of the body. For example, if you have an apple that's sitting on the counter and the skin of the apple is fully intact, it can sit there for a couple of weeks before it starts to break down and deteriorate. However, you take that same apple, you drop it on the floor, it gets a bruise on the side. It's within a matter of a couple of days that now that integrity or the terrain of that apple is no longer intact and the bugs start to invade it. And what are the bugs there for but to clean up the mess? And I published another book 2 years ago that came out in 2006, and the title of the book is called Foul, Bird Flu, It's Not What You Think. And really that book it's 17 chapters or 18 chapters, and probably 10 of those chapters are about the problems with the flu shot and about the whole influenza pandemic scare. And bird flu is still out there. It's just not in our mainstream media. I still get the alerts for it. But the last chapter, pulling it all together, is just exactly about that, Mike. It's about the health of the terrain, and that if we keep our terrain healthy by all those suggestions, we really don't have a lot to fear.
Isn't it also true that a child or an adult or really any human being, that when their immune system is given the chance to adapt or overcome an infection in a natural way, that immune system is then stronger versus future infections? And then at the same time, if they're given a crutch or a vaccine, that effectively denies their immune system the ability to learn and adapt, and thus makes them more susceptible to future infections.
There's some truth to what you said. I think I would frame that a little bit differently, in that vaccination is temporary immunity, if you even want to call it that. I mean, vaccines have injected something that you develop an antibody that may or may not protect you. We really don't know. When you have the flu, or if you have measles, you have mumps, you have chickenpox, your body has worked it out internally and has gone through the war and has won. And now, the next time you get reintroduced to that virus or bacteria, the body says, I know what that's like. We're going to pick up a broom and get that out of here before it causes any problem. That's lifetime long-term immunity versus the temporary pseudo-immunity of vaccines. And because of the pseudo-immunity, now we're all developing booster shots because it doesn't last forever. We're also developing vaccines to take care of problems caused by vaccines. The chickenpox vaccine has eliminated the chickenpox virus out in the community, and so now because we don't have that virus around anymore, those of us that had chickenpox as children are going to be more susceptible to getting shingles as an adult. So now what have they done? They've created a shingles vaccine. So now we're creating vaccines to correct problems caused by vaccines.
Oh, fascinating. Well, there goes the never-ending chain of medical intervention. But what about this question? I'm sure you're asked this all the time. Doctors will say that vaccines are responsible for basically wiping out smallpox and polio, and they were a huge success. What's your answer to that?
My answer is it's another history lesson. When you look back historically, the smallpox was way going away before, even in the early 1970s. There was a spokesperson from the CDC, Dr. Tom Mack, who was one of the persons who had helped with the smallpox program from the CDC, who said that smallpox was way on its way out. It would have gone away anyways, even if we wouldn't have done a ring vaccination and containment, because it was going away with improved hygiene, improved health care, and improved living conditions. There are some estimates that less than 10 or 20% of the entire world population was ever vaccinated with the smallpox vaccine. It went away on its own. The same thing with the polio infections. The polio had peaked and was way on its way out in this country before we instituted the polio vaccine in 1954. It was already on its way out. Worldwide, the only places that had the polio virus and still do, there are 11 countries that still do, are places that don't have flush toilets, don't have good hygiene, don't have ways to take care of the fecal materials that are in their communities. It's a hygiene issue. It's not a vaccine issue.
So why are health authorities so confident today that the vaccines were responsible for wiping these things out? I mean, is this just the propagation of a medical myth that they're sticking with? What's going on?
That's how I would answer that. I mean, it's a good story. Stick to it.
Right. It sells more vaccines.
It's been working for a long time, and we've got, when I do community talks, I was in Idaho in March and did a very large community talk, but there was a mixed age group in there. There were grandparents in there, there were people in their 40s, and there were some very young parents, and parents that were probably in their early 20s, and they were there with their little bitty babies that were just precious. So at one point I said, how many people in here that are over 40 had measles, mumps, chickenpox, things like that when they were kids? Every hand went up. I said, so on the break, I want you to commingle with these young parents over here and tell them what that was like. What was that experience like? What did you do? What did your parents do? Because young parents are terrified of these illnesses because they don't understand them. And once they start hearing that, most of us didn't die, most of us had it was just a rite of passage for a lot of people in their 40s and 50s, they don't have to be so fearful. And so much of this industry is absolutely just fear-driven.
It certainly is, and we're out of time here, Sherry, but I want to encourage listeners to check out your website one more time. That's www.sayingnotovaccines.com. Your book is also called Saying No to Vaccines. It's available on Amazon.com. You've been listening to an exclusive interview with Dr. Sherry Tenpenny. Thanks for joining me today, and we'll talk to you again soon.